Hello, everybody. So today I am happy to welcome Chandler to Autoimmune Rehab, and she is going to share with us her story from going from being completely bedridden to being a much more healthier, functional, happy adult. If you could see what she looks like, which I'm looking at her right now while we're talking to her, you would never know that she's been totally flat down in bed with all kinds of different issues, autoimmune and some others maybe not totally autoimmune, but somewhat related. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about who you are and what brings you on to share your story.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me. I have a background in teaching, and the shortest summary that I can share is that I quit my teaching job, went and backpacked in Europe, and then just completely had my health crash maybe like 15 years ago. And, as many listeners probably also experienced, went to so many doctors trying to figure out what was wrong. Nobody knew what was wrong. I think at one point I tracked over 100 different symptoms that were just constantly changing and felt like my body was just rebelling against me. So my whole story is probably about 10 years of investigative work on what's going on with my own body. And I would say I'm 98% recovered now. I rarely have any symptoms. And so I'm very lucky to be sort of in the space of now helping functional medicine practitioners reach people who need to be healed. So it's kind of like a full circle moment, but that's the summary of my story.
That's awesome for sure. So, like you said, you were totally fine in bed. You had all these symptoms. A lot of doctors kept dismissing you. They kept saying it's all in your head, which, anybody that's listening to this can relate. I know I went through that phase at my point before my diagnosis and everything else too. It's pretty common. So, what was that final moment where you finally got those answers, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so I probably had seen 20 or so doctors, done all the testing available, and they're like, there's a few things that are coming up kind of weird, but we don't see anything that's, definitive for a diagnosis. So I actually ended up finding my own doctor. I had an emotional healer that I was seeing. I lived in Monterey. I had just finished grad school, and she was helping me with some of the mental and emotional aspects of healing from chronic illness and honestly, all of the trauma of being gaslit by doctors. Like, you're fine, everything's great, and you feel awful in your own body. So she had a friend who worked with Lyme disease, and she's like, "Has anybody diagnosed you or tested you for Lyme?" And I was like, "No, never gone that route before." So she had referred me to a doctor in San Diego, and I started working with him and did two different tick-borne panels. And I remember the meeting when we went over my labs, he was like, I've never seen as many co-infections as you have ever. And he had been doing it for maybe 6 years at that point with that particular test. So it was just so validating, especially to go to, I was newly married, to go to my husband and to go to my family and just say, like, look, they found something that explains all the symptoms and why they're always changing and why I feel like my body's attacking myself. So it was super validating, if not a bit intimidating, to be told you have the most co-infections of anyone he's seen. But, I started about a 2-year protocol with him and just kind of going through all the different root causes that went along with it. Because with Lyme, as I'm sure a lot of people know, your immune system just gets totally attacked. And then other things that maybe your body could have fought off before they're not able to. So a lot of people can have problems with like parasites and, metals, and mold was a big thing for me too. So just a whole lot of different root causes. But yeah, that was kind of the moment where I was like, this is an actual answer and something that I can pursue in healing.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And so it's one of those things where you're like really relieved and celebrating, but at the same time being like, oh no, now I have to go through all this because now I
Yeah.
know what I have and it's
It's
going
a
to be this
long road
long
ahead.
journey to heal. But yeah, but you're right. I mean, the thing a lot of people don't realize is that autoimmune disorders, they build up over time. They don't just come from nowhere. There's always a root cause. It may not be the same root cause for everybody, but there always is at least one. And Lyme and mold are two of the bigger
Yeah.
triggers that can then, it starts with that, but then it triggers your whole immune system to set off a whole bunch of stuff. So, yeah.
Definitely.
So tell
Yeah.
us a
And
little bit about that protocol that you went with. What was
sure.
like the first thing that he had you do?
Yeah, so the first thing that he talked about was actually drainage pathways, which was a brand new concept for me. So it was just making sure that all of your organs of elimination are working properly. Like, are you going to the bathroom enough to kind of like clear out your body? We focused on liver, kidney support, obviously colon health and lymphatic support, and just like the basics of all the things that I've gotten, I guess, a little bit backed up. I remember I had swollen lymph nodes all over my neck and like my armpits and everywhere, and they never went away. So we did a lot of things additionally with like dry brushing and infrared saunas and rebounding. He had me get like the little trampoline just to kind of like move some of the lymph through my body. And at that point, I wasn't really moving much because I felt so sick. So just little things to kind of continue moving the body, and then we actually moved into parasite cleansing, which was very interesting. I was like, I don't have parasites. There's no way. Like, I've never like traveled to third world countries. I can't have these, but they had actually found I had a really big strongyloides infection, so we treated that, and then once I went through that cleansing, I really actually started to feel a lot better. So we tackled like metals and mold support and things like that. And we didn't actually heavily hit the Lyme until the end because we were just trying to like take the layers off so that my own immune system and my own body could function as it's supposed to function. So it was like I said, a pretty intense protocol. And a lot of it also was getting my mindset and like kind of wrapping my brain around the fact that I don't want to stay sick. I don't want to be in this loop of like, wow, I'm 26 and I can't walk. This is horrible. Because I was stuck there for about a year. I was really upset. I was seeing all of my friends getting married, having kids, going on vacations, and I'm literally a newlywed just in my bed, working from my laptop, like, and so it took a while, even maybe longer than the physical part, to kind of heal my brain as well.
Yeah, that's good for sure. And what a lot of people don't realize is that, yes, going to third world countries can give you additional parasites you may not catch in the US, but a lot more of us have parasites than we realize. And Lyme in and of itself is actually a parasite. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome to hear. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I think part of the problem that some of us come across is we start trying to heal what we think is our main problem, but we've got other co-infections, other things going on that are blocking us from being able to attain our true healing.
Yeah, it's
So that's really
interesting.
good.
It's really interesting because I feel like you kind of resolve one thing and you're peeling back layers and you're like, oh, like my symptoms have changed and something else is kind of popping up as my, most troublesome symptom. So I always think of it like an onion. Like you're peeling back a layer of you're taking care of something and you're kind of moving toward healing, but then there might be another layer that your body was kind of like suppressing because there was more pressing symptoms that were showing up at that time. So, yeah, it's definitely a journey and definitely an interesting one.
For sure, absolutely. Okay. So you also talked about just now about how you started doing a lot of these different protocols. Like, at one point you were probably using some antibiotics because of the Lyme, herbals, detox, elimination diets, and you started feeling better. You started having, some relief of some of your symptoms. But you talk about a little bit how your brain got stuck and about how, if you don't really get over that brain problem, then you can still, have some of that remnants left over, if you will, of that autoimmune or that chronic illness. So, talk to us a little bit about, how do you unstuck or unstick, I guess you will, the
Yeah.
brain to really, make it so that those protocols are more effective and you actually really heal.
Definitely. Yeah, that was a huge piece for me. So one of my symptoms, diagnoses that I was dealing with was hyperadrenergic POTS. So every time I stood up, my heart rate would go from like 55 to like 160 until I sat down. Yeah, and walking would make it higher. Stairs, I could not do stairs. I couldn't carry anything because it was just too much pressure on my body. And Because of that, I started being reactive in stores. I had, chemical sensitivities, as I'm sure a lot of people start to develop, with autoimmune conditions. So I'd walk into a store and it'd be like sensory overload. Like the lights would really bother me and the smells. And I've passed out in many grocery stores before. And so I think part of it too was I started kind of fearing interacting with the world just because I was so reactive to everything. So, and that's natural. Obviously, our brains are trying to protect our bodies, but I had to do a lot of very intentional work on rewiring my limbic system. And, I bought a couple different programs. There's a lot of great ones out there, but I would do things like tapping, saying these things to my body to kind of calm it down in acute situations. And then longer term, limbic system retraining systems that just were an hour a day. You had to actually like sit down, and there was visualizations, there were things that you physically had to like speak out loud so that you could calm your body down. Like, hey, I'm home, I'm sitting on my couch. There's no threat right now for my body. I mean, internally, yes, I guess, but there's no external threat that I need to be in fight or flight about. So there's a whole bunch of different things that I tried that really helped. But I think one of the biggest was doing visualizations of what I wanted my life to be like and thinking about, okay, like if my body was fully functional and I could do anything that I wanted, let me take 10 minutes and really feel into like what am I waking up and looking at? What does my house look like? Do I have a partner? Do I have a family? What are the smells, the sounds, and really getting into the sensory detail of just like this is going to be my body one day. I am not okay with this current life that I'm living. And like, I will put in the work. I'll do the protocols. I'll do the mindset healing, whatever I need to do to achieve that. And yes, like I said, it took me about 10 years from when I first had symptoms until right now, where I feel like I almost never have symptoms anymore. And it's not an easy road, but to me to just like have shed all of the worry of waking up and like what is my body going to do today? What am I going to react to today? It's totally worth the work.
That's awesome. I love that. It's kind of like I forget who said it, but there's like that statement that what the mind can achieve, can conceive and believe the mind can achieve, or something like
Yeah.
that. And
Hmm.
it's kind of affects your body too and everything else. And it's what I've told people on a lot of other episodes, and we've had other guests say too, is that if you don't believe you're actually going to heal, you won't.
Hmm.
It's
I
kind of the
agree.
same concept along the lines of if you don't believe that you're going to get out of debt, if you're currently in a lot of debt and you have financial issues, if you don't believe that you can fix it, you won't. If you
Right.
don't believe that you can go get a different kind of a job, you won't do it. So, your mind is powerful over a lot of aspects of your life and more so than a lot of people believe. So I love that, just sit there, start slow probably. I mean, you did it for a whole hour, but I'm sure some people,
Yeah.
might be struggling to do it for 10 minutes, but
Totally. Yeah, start with anything. I mean, the biggest thing for me, I'm very type A. I'm such a list person. So for me, it was like, okay, what's my morning routine? What am I doing before bed to sort of like unwind and support my body? And then just checking it off every day. I mean, it wasn't fun. I didn't like doing it. It was a lot of time and effort, but I started to see results pretty quickly from it. And so then I was like, okay, like we have hope. I can walk to the mailbox without having to sit down two or three times. Like at that point, I couldn't have even stood to make a smoothie for myself because my heart just like it would race so much. And then I would have all of this cascade of like the fight or flight, adrenaline symptoms and everything like that. So it's totally worth the work, even if it is, 5 minutes a day that you can do right now. It's worth it.
that's awesome. I love that. That's amazing. Okay, so you have what's called a brain healing blueprint that includes 30 strategies for healing. What role do you feel like things like trauma, attachment wounds, emotional work play in your recovery? Because, like we've kind of already mentioned, a lot of times people underestimate how those connections between your mind and body work. And
Mhm.
I think add to the fact that how fixing that makes it easier for you to implement some of the physical things like lifestyle changes and things like that.
Definitely, yeah. And I have always been pretty open about sharing my struggles and my story, even just on my personal social media. And so I had people ask me, like, you look like you're doing great. I mean, I lift pretty frequently, 6 days a week. So they'll see pictures and they're like, wow, like you really like rebuilt your body and you look strong. Like, what have you done? And so I just put together a little list of my top strategies that helped me get in the mindset to heal. So none of this is like supplements or protocols. That's all like your practitioner, obviously work with them. But I just put together all of the healing, like I said, emotional, even like soul, like really deep soul work. Because I was so focused on getting rid of the infections and detoxing that for a while, I feel like I just neglected all of those other components. And we're such complex beings, and it's not just a physical healing. I feel like when you're chronically ill, you do have to consider the spiritual, mental, emotional, whatever that looks like for you. It's different for everyone. But there were a couple things that I worked through with EMDR. I absolutely love. I found a great therapist who helped me work through some childhood traumas and even working through the trauma of being so chronically ill. I feel like that's, something that we don't really consider. A trauma seems like this, like we call it big T or little t trauma. There's huge traumas like car accidents or, somebody you love dying and things like that. But there's all like being sick for so long, that's a trauma in itself. So it's just a list of, different tools like red light tools, different programs that I use to kind of help. And I give a little blurb about what that did for me and kind of like ranking them in a way. A really good book that I read was The Body Keeps the Score, and just kind of getting an introduction to this side of things. But even things like setting boundaries. I was such a people pleaser. I'm an Enneagram 2 wing 3, which is like my relationships are so important to me. So I would, go help a friend knowing that that's going to drain all my spoons in the chronic illness world. We all know that term, but I would sacrifice, whatever I could do to support friends at the expense of my own health. So it was just, kind of learning like what can I do and what did I do to get my mindset on track. So yeah, it's been really helpful. I've had people just ask me, can you throw a list together? So I have just a little list of 30 things.
Cool. And I'm assuming that you have a link somewhere that we can link to in the comments that
Yeah,
people
yep.
can
And
go check out.
it's just upsellhealth.com/brain, and I'll get it to you so we can put it in the show notes.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have people check it out because, yeah, that sounds really cool. Like, that would definitely help for sure. Absolutely. Okay. So let's see. So then, okay, yeah, this is a good one, I think. So you talk about a lot, we've mentioned this several times, how you went from not being able to walk to your mailbox to doing hour-long spin classes and building multiple businesses. You've mentioned some of that. For somebody who's just in that survival mode, what would you say was the very first small step that started to shift things?
I think for me, it was learning about how to regulate my own nervous system and just doing a lot of research on the vagus nerve. Even if it's like a 5-minute breathing exercise that you find on YouTube, or if it's warm out, you go outside and you do some grounding where you're in your bare feet in the sun with it on the grass. And I think a lot of it too is just shifting from tracking my symptoms. So maybe this is relatable to listeners too, but I would write down the time, what I just ate, what symptom was, how long did it last, and then I would really try to intellectualize what did I do to cause that symptom. And with, autoimmune conditions and mold and Lyme, sometimes there's just not like a logical reason. Your body's doing all of this internal work and it's trying to regulate itself because I do believe our bodies are brilliant and they do want to heal and they just need the right tools and the right order and the right support to do it. So our bodies are always trying to like fix it internally. So there may not be a logical explanation like you ate this food, therefore this happened. So I switched from tracking symptoms to tracking like little wins or gratitude. And it really just shifted my whole mindset. I feel like I was just sitting there in this like fight or flight, like what's gonna happen next? Let me write it down, let me figure it out. And then I just shifted to like, what went well today? What are the wins? What are the happy things? It was some days it was very difficult to come up with one thing. And so I would write like I had three guinea pigs at the time because we were in a tiny little 400 square foot apartment in California. We weren't supposed to have any pets, so I had to get, something small that my landlord wouldn't know about. But I would just write, I'm grateful for these little animals. Like I would just, they're like, kind of small. I would just grab one of them and like lay on the couch and have one on my chest, and they make these really cute little noises. So it's like just, I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for having, my husband was supportive at the time, and we did end up getting divorced because of some later issues with my health. But at the time, I'm grateful. He brought me a green juice. That's so amazing. And so that I feel like really helped spur me into this, like, okay, I have hope. I feel like I'm calming my body down by pointing those things out instead of being in this like vigilant, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? So I would say like yeah, nervous system support, looking up the vagus nerve. I even splashing cold water on my face to get myself out of that like anxious fight or flight state. There's so many free things that you can do to support your body, but yeah, just finding ways that work for you, even if it's just 5 minutes, like I said.
That's awesome. I love that for sure. Because it's like, I think sometimes we think the wins have to be big of, oh, I did a whole hour workout today, or I went
Right.
all day long working without taking any naps or anything. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. But the win could be I got out of bed and stood up and walked around for 10 minutes
Yeah.
today.
Definitely. And that was me for like 6 months. My wins were tiny. It was like, oh, I sat in a chair in the kitchen and I made myself an egg. Like, but for me, that was big at the time.
For sure. Okay, so we're coming down to the end now. So the two final questions I want to ask you. So if somebody's listening and they've been fighting this autoimmune condition for years, maybe they feel like they've tried everything and they're losing hope, what would you tell them
Mm.
about the possibilities for healing that you haven't already said?
Yeah, so I would say just believing you can recover is the most important thing. And also, knowing that your body is designed to heal, you're in charge of figuring out how to remove the barriers, whether that's infections, toxins, trauma, stress, belief systems. There's so many components, and obviously your team, your care team is vital in that too. But just knowing that like you do have to address all the layers, the mental, the physical, the emotional. And sometimes that last, 40%, 30% is deep work that you have to do. You really have to dig into, what's holding me back? What haven't I tried? I think something I've seen, even with friends who struggle with, I have two of my best friends have MS. And so kind of going through like my Lyme journey, they got diagnosed with MS, and we're all like seeing different doctors and seeing how to kind of like heal from that. And all of us are very determined. We're all like that, perfectionist. Like I'm going to do whatever they say. I'm going to do my own research. But I think understanding that healing is not linear. There's so many ups and downs. There were times where I was like, I would have a couple great weeks and I had so much hope, and then I would crash again. And so just understanding, like if you map out your whole journey, you're going to hopefully be on an upward trend, even though there's peaks and valleys and things like that. So I would say don't give up. You might be like on your way to a big breakthrough. And then the final thing was just me repeating to myself, I'm not broken. My body isn't against me. I had to really wrestle with my I guess relationship with my own body because I didn't feel safe in my own body. And that's like living in a home where you feel unsafe, and it's hard. So it's knowing that your body is wanting to help and kind of getting on the same page as your body. And knowing that maybe there's something that you can learn throughout all of this. Like, what is your illness and what is the autoimmune condition trying to teach you? Is it maybe trying to, force you to slow down and address things you're avoiding or work through some past traumas and things like that? So just yeah, knowing that you are able to heal and that your body isn't against you when it feels like it is, with autoimmune conditions especially, that was a big mindset shift for me.
Awesome. That's great. I love that. Okay. So the last question I always like to ask people is if you could go back in time to, let's say, maybe right before you got diagnosed, you were still sick, but and you'd been trying to find answers but hadn't found them yet. What is
Mhm.
one thing you know now that you wish you knew then that you would tell yourself?
I would say the biggest thing for me was that healing required me to really rebuild my identity and where I found my worth. So I've said this a little bit, but I was such an achiever. I was always like straight A. If I got an A minus, I was really upset, winning state in volleyball. I played competitively. I wanted to be the best at everything. And so part of me was like me pushing myself so hard. I was working full time. I had two, side part-time jobs. I was trying to start another business. I was working out before I got sick. I was doing boxing, not kickboxing, but actual, boxing and
Wow.
boxing conditioning. And so it was like I had a very regimented, 4:30 a.m. routine until I went to bed. And just knowing that, being sick would be such a great teacher for me. And actually, for me, it led me to my purpose and what I do now, with my marketing agency. So I think being able to reframe what's important, I found a lot of my worth in my achievement. When I was sick, I couldn't get up and clean the house. I couldn't cook for my husband like I'd wanted to if I was feeling well. So I really had to learn what is it about me and who I am as a person that makes me valuable, just innately valuable, rather than what I can do for people. So that was a big, big lesson. And I wish I would have known that going into it because I really struggled with being sick and just feeling like I couldn't accomplish all the things I wanted to accomplish. So I think just going back and like maybe finding more space and time for myself, knowing that it was okay to relax, knowing that everything, wasn't wrapped up in what I could do for people, but just kind of resting in, who I am as a person and my soul and like my heart is enough.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so if somebody wants to get in touch with you, we'll link to your list of things, healing things. Any other place that you would like anybody to reach out and connect with?
Yeah, so the easiest is probably just upsellhealth.com/start. So I have, if you're a practitioner listening, I have a whole bunch of resources for practitioners. If you're someone who's, trying to heal from autoimmune, I actually am just launching a patient archetype quiz. So there'll be a really cool matching system. If you're still looking for a practitioner, you don't know who to work with, and you're looking into like functional medicine. I'll have a quiz you can take. It's short. It'll tell you your one of 15 kind of healing archetypes, what's important to you as a patient. And it'll be able to match you with practitioners who have those same values and kind of have, if data is important to you and lab work is important to you, there's going to be certain practitioners that will be a good match. So just look out for that. It's coming out soon. And then obviously the Brain Healing Blueprint is a great place to start.
That's awesome. I love that matching service.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I have not seen anything like that, and I know a lot of people can benefit from that because
Absolutely.
so many different practitioners out there, and people don't know what to look for, and they don't, they go through them like pieces of candy almost,
Yeah, and
and
it's
it's like,
expensive. That
yeah.
was my problem too. I knew I wanted somebody who could do mind, body, soul, and who would believe, all my symptoms and listen to me. So one of my biggest things was I actually wanted a doctor who had been through some sort of Lyme, autoimmune, mold before. That was important to me because I feel like there's so many crazy symptoms and herxing. We didn't even get into that, but so there is a practitioner archetype called the Phoenix. So it's like they've healed themselves, and that was what I wanted. So it just depends on what is important to you and kind of what you're healing from. But yeah, it'll be a great resource and one I wish I had when I was sick because I had no idea how to find someone to help me.
Awesome, cool, great. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Allie. And like I said, we'll link the resources below and be sure to grab the free list and get in touch with her if you are still looking for a practitioner or just curious to see what she has to offer. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.